Welcome to Eureka. TB and typhoid both are caused by bacterial infection. But whereas TB is dreadful, very difficult to manage, typhoid comes and goes, although we may be discomforted. How does the immunology in our body works when we are infected by bacterial agents? Our guest today, Dr. Dheeraj Kumar, who is a faculty at the International Center for Genetic Engineering and Biotechnology and heads the group on cellular immunology. We will be having a very good conversation with him on this issue. Keep watching Eureka. We will take a quick look at his brief profile and continue this conversation.
Tuberculosis is a dreaded disease and remains a serious challenge to the success of government's mission on Healthy India. India contributes 25% of tuberculosis cases globally, and Government of India has set up a stiff target of TB eradication by 2025. This is where the innovative work being carried out by Dr. Dheeraj Kumar, who is presently working as the group leader of Cellular Immunology Group at the International Center for Genetic Engineering and Biotechnology. Dr. Dheeraj completed his master's degree from IARI New Delhi in 2002 and PhD in Life Sciences, focusing on immunology and systems biology at ICGEB in the year 2007. His early encounters with systems biology, which is now being considered the answer to majority of the roadblocks that we face today in the field of life sciences as a whole and medicine in particular, helped him develop an interdisciplinary program on tuberculosis at ICGEB. His major contribution is in the form of charting out a detailed map of molecular interactions between the humans and Mycobacterium tuberculosis. Through his works, he has identified several human targets which could control the survival of Mycobacterium tuberculosis, thus providing the platform for host-directed therapy against tuberculosis. Presently, his scientific work includes understanding the host pathogen interactions in case of Mycobacterium tuberculosis infection, innate immune response, and inflammation. For his scientific works, Dr. Dheeraj has received many recognitions. Noted among them are Shyama Prasad Mukherjee Fellowship from CSIR in 2002, INSA Medal for Young Scientist 2011, and most recently the coveted Shanti Swaroop Bhatnagar Award 2019, which is also India's most prestigious science award given by Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, Government of India.
It's a very, very wonderful opportunity. It's a very interesting institute. Let me first congratulate you for this award that has been announced for you. The India's greatest or topmost scientific award, Bhatnagar Award. How did you feel when that news came into you?
Thank you very much. And I couldn't feel anything at that time because as a scientist, as a student of science, that is one thing which you look forward to in your career, that probably one day you will receive Shanti Swaroop Bhatnagar Award. So it was surreal, and I'm really excited to be awarded this very prestigious award in Indian science.
That's a very good thing. I mean, it's a nice effort. I mean, it's an important award for your work, which is related to immunology. So let's start with some of the, let's say, basic understanding. One of the area that you work is how to address TB.
Right.
Basically, the challenges that today many of the TB drugs, even though they are very good, are what is usually called as drug resistance.
Yes.
Right. So, what is this drug resistance? How does it occur? I mean, what happens at bacteria level?
So for all the bacterial infections, you have drugs available, and they are called antibiotics.
Yeah.
So the way these antibiotics work, they target some very vital function of the bacteria, and you inhibit those function, and that helps you to kill the bacteria.
Okay.
So, there are a lot of bacteria which can cause disease, and Mycobacterium tuberculosis, which causes TB in humans, that is, among the more serious pathogens. There has been several drugs or antibiotics which were discovered which can act on Mycobacterium tuberculosis, and but slowly what people realize in clinics that this bacteria due to its amazing abilities, can develop resistance to those drugs.
Okay.
And then it was felt a need that you should give a combination therapy. And the current treatment regimen for tuberculosis, even for a normal infection, you have 4 drugs.
Okay.
4 antibiotics are given.
4 antibiotics are given together.
Okay. Right? And generally these are isoniazid, rifampicin, ethambutol, and pyrazinamide. And these are given to the patients in the after early discovery of tuberculosis. The reason for this was that this bacteria, due to its some amazing capabilities, develops resistance against the drugs.
Okay.
Right? And when I say resistance, it means that the same amount of drug which would kill this bacteria today, maybe after 2 weeks it is not able to kill bacteria at the same level. So now the drug is basically ineffective in controlling that. One of the reasons, I can just quickly point out very serious issues here. So for any other bacterial infection, you take a drug for antibiotics for 3 days or 5 days course. Your clinician will prescribe for 5 days medicine and you are fine. For tuberculosis, this combination of 4 drugs are actually prescribed for 6 months.
6 months?
6 months.
Okay.
And you have to take daily. And after that, for another 3 months, you take isoniazid and rifampicin. That's the standard WHO guideline.
So which means that roughly about 9 months you will be on antibiotics.
Exactly. So you will be on antibiotics, and the doses are quite high. So they have a lot of toxicity effects. Also, your liver starts showing some issues. So what happens that when you give treatment to the patient, after a couple of months, the patient starts feeling good because these drugs are quite effective. And considering that tuberculosis targets a lot of people from the less privileged classes, so they would like to go out for work rather than take medicine and stay because that has a lot of side effects. They would stop taking drugs, and what that results into in next few months or a year time later, they will develop a relapse. So this is a serious problem, and in last couple of decades, drug resistance in tuberculosis, or it's happening for other bacteria as well, but for tuberculosis has become a major challenge simply because the duration of treatment is quite
really
long,
large.
right?
We were talking about how, for example, in TB, the drug resistance is developing, the bacteria is also evolving. So we are in a kind of a arms race. So is it an arms race which will just continue, or is there a new way to address this?
Excellent point. So this is exactly what we started almost a decade back, trying to address this problem of drug resistance in an unconventional manner. So what I explained earlier, that all the antibiotics try to target a vital function of bacteria, and that helps killing of the bug. What we realize that when a bacteria enters a host body, for easy understanding, I would say host cell, there it utilizes a lot of processes inside the host for its own survival and persistence that also helps the bacteria to cause disease. So the concept that we started working on was, if we identify which host molecules or proteins are helping bacteria to survive and persist inside the body, then you will have an entirely new dimension on how you target bacteria without actually killing them, without actually targeting their own vital function. So the advantage is two-pronged. One is that you are of course able to kill bacteria by targeting host, but secondly, since you are not targeting bacteria directly, their ability to develop resistance against it is dramatically reduced because there is no selection pressure on the bacteria if you target the host. While for other drugs which are directly targeting the bug, they are under immense selective pressure, and as Darwin would say, during that pressure natural selection happens and a small variant will develop which will lead to more drug resistance. So that's the the added advantage of targeting the host factors. So we started looking at the host factor, and so that is something which, and we are still continuing to do that. We had some very interesting understanding for the host biology, and also how you can target the bacteria through this.
Yes. So what was that work? I mean, you were looking at host factors. What were the main findings that you got out of this?
So I would begin with my postdoctoral work, which I did here only at ICGEB, and the way it was decided that we infected a host macrophage, which is the target cell where bacteria infects. At any given time, a human cell can have around 20,000 proteins.
Yeah.
So we decided to remove one protein at a time in an infected cell and try to look for that after removal of which proteins bacterial survival was compromised. These proteins were helping bacteria to survive inside the host. It's like, bacteria has taken hostage of your own defense machinery and utilizing it to cause disease in the host.
So basically bacteria is using our own mechanism for its own survival and
Exactly.
Development, right? Okay, now one logical question. I mean, okay, when you took this protein one by one, you find that some bacteria, the bacteria was showing lesser activity, or maybe it is dead, or it's not able to function. But can you really establish a causal relationship? Maybe it is a protein which is essential for any cell to survive.
Right.
So it may not be like it's being specifically used.
Right.
Right.
Exactly. So that's important point because cell death is a very important defense mechanism. So against infections.
Yeah.
So if a bacteria is infecting a cell and the cell dies, the bacteria also dies along with it.
Yeah.
So bacteria doesn't want to kill the cell, and that's where when I started my group in 2010, I started looking at the processes which regulate cell death during bacterial survival, and that led to even more interesting understandings that how you can selectively target host factors and achieve bacterial killing without actually affecting host survival. So those are the things which we developed over time, trying to figure out that how these very complex physiological processes in the immune cells are happening.
Okay, let me also try to understand your work much more graphically. When figuratively we say that we take a cell, infect it,
Yeah.
and take out the protein, it's not actually going to happen in that particular fashion, right? You can't take a cell, you cannot infect it.
Of course, yeah.
You cannot
You
take a
do
protein
it,
one
you
by
do
one,
it on a set
right?
of cells. Yeah.
So what do you exactly do? How do you describe to a general person how it is actually done?
So there are reagents which you have to understand that how proteins are formed in a cell. So you have DNA which codes the genes, right? Then that gets transcribed, which forms the mRNA, and that gets translated, which forms the protein, right? So there are strategies, and there are many strategies actually, but one strategy is called small interfering RNA, right? siRNA approach. So in fact, the discoverer of those got Nobel Prize a decade back. So what these small RNA does, they go and bind to the messenger RNA, which is the transcript of any given gene, and degrades that.
Okay.
When that happens, the no protein will be formed.
So the message is kind of shut down.
So what you do is you add small RNA, small interfering RNA against one protein at a time, and that way that protein level will go down in the cell. And when that happens, and if there is any effect on bacterial survival, you can record it through your assay, the one that you have developed. So we actually developed a high throughput system, manual high throughput. That's kind of very contradictory statement. Manually and high throughput, generally some robotics are used, but so we actually got a lot of students, and they were trained in doing the pipetting and handling the media and cultures. So they were involved in doing this manually. So we actually did in 96 well plates. So in one plate you had 96 wells, and at any given time you could test around 60 siRNAs.
Okay.
And then you can do it in duplicates and triplicates, and then repeat this whole exercise. So yeah, a long exercise. It took a lot of time.
This work of you establishing this 270 proteins as helping the bacteria to survive in our cell, keep our cell alive, at the same time bacteria to be also active. How much time it took?
So it took almost, I would say, 2.5 years.
2.5 years?
2.5 years.
And how many people were involved in performing this?
So we had around 16 students who were working on it with me, and of course with Dr. Kanvi Rao, he was my postdoc guide. And so we had a lot of people working there, and our working hours would go in the middle of the night, and at many times I would drop students at home after their work gets over, because they all were working for this larger goal to achieve this. So that's
so you
how
had also trained your students
yeah,
in
exactly.
actually
So
performing
you begin with that. It's a simple
it's
exercise.
a huge work, right? Yeah.
Right.
Fine. This is where we'll take a very short break. Keep watching Eureka. We'll have this conversation after a very short break.
क्या आप जानते हैं कि अगर आप इलाज में लापरवाही का शिकार होते हैं तो आप एक आम उपभोक्ता की तरह कंज्यूमर कोर्ट में इसकी शिकायत कर सकते हैं। इस रविवार सुबह 10 बजे आपका कानून में हम मेडिकल नेग्लिजेंस यानी इलाज में लापरवाही पर चर्चा करेंगे। हम आपको बताएंगे कि मेडिकल लापरवाही का शिकार होने की स्थिति में आप अपनी लड़ाई किस प्रकार लड़ सकते हैं और आपके पास मेडिकल लापरवाही के खिलाफ क्या-क्या अधिकार हैं। प्रोग्राम के दौरान आप हमें कॉल भी कर सकते हैं। तो इस रविवार सुबह 10 बजे देखना मत भूलिएगा आपका कानून लाइव, सिर्फ राज्यसभा टेलीविजन पर।
Welcome back to Eureka, and we are having a very wonderful, very insightful conversation with Dr. Dheeraj Kumar, who is heading the Cellular Immunology Division at International Center for Genetic Engineering and Biotechnology, a leading institution in New Delhi. We are going to discuss now how they actually identified this 270 protein. It's not something like in one day they could have done. How long it took, what are the process? So, one of the area that you worked is identifying this protein, that was around your postdoc.
Right.
But then you persisted in finding out other mechanisms where you are not targeting the bacteria but the host, right? So, what were the other area? One area that you have been looking at is how autophagy works, right? Huh?
Right. So, the work that we did with those 270 molecules that we identified, that kind of, I would say, pioneered the field of host-directed therapy against tuberculosis. Although it didn't give you therapy at the outset, but it gave you idea that how you can target the host and achieve bacterial killing. So, I was starting my career at that time, and I thought of looking at the biology behind it. So, one of the aspect which kind of converged from these 270 molecules, that quite a few of them were regulating some very basic homeostatic process in the cell, and autophagy was one of those processes. So it looked like that autophagy was actually helping the bacteria in some way or another.
Let's just get a quick clarification. What does this autophagy means actually?
So autophagy, as the name suggests, it has two parts, auto and phagy. So self-eating. So it's a cellular mechanism which cells evolved to take care of stress. And what happens that during a stress situation, when there is some damaged mitochondria or some misfolded proteins, these autophagy body, which is known as autophagosomes, they will form and they will capture these potentially damaging things like mitochondria or misfolded proteins, or for that matter bacteria, into a compartment and then take it for degradation.
So it's something like, for example, a potter is making a pot and the pot has not come well. I mean, he just takes it and recycles it back into.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So something
it's
like that.
Something like that.
Yeah, okay.
But it's a self-eating machinery. That's how the initially name suggests. So the important point with autophagy is that it's a very important homeostatic function, and it's required for cellular survival. Now, what was also known in the field that autophagy can actually capture the bacteria and take it for degradation. So it should also be able to kill the bacteria. Now think of from a different perspective. If bacteria infects a cell and it tries to survive inside, it has to block autophagy.
Yeah. Otherwise, autophagy will kill it.
Otherwise, it will kill it. But if it blocks autophagy,
the cell itself will die.
The cell itself may die because it's an important function for the cell also.
Yeah.
So, how does this contradictory, event got regulated? So that's how we got interested into it. That how these events are regulated, and we found that you can call that the entire autophagy machinery as the homeostatic arm of the cell, and then the one which targets bacteria for degradation as the defense arm of the cell.
Okay.
And what we found that these two are segregated. So the bacteria upon infection targets only the defense arm, not the homeostatic arm. So that's the smartness of the bacteria, that it allows the cells to survive because it's not touching this homeostatic arm, but it's capturing the, blocking the defense arm.
Okay.
And so it survives also, and it allows cells also to survive. That's the, the mechanism that we came up with.
So what was that mechanism actually like?
So the mechanism was, you require a specific, effector molecules to be recruited to these autophagosome bodies, right? And one of those molecules is known as Rab7. It's a small GTPase. I mean, that's too much of detail, but that's a molecule which is important for maturation of this compartment. So what the bacteria does, it doesn't allow Rab7 to come to its compartment.
Okay.
While Rab7 comes to other compartments where it gets matured and degraded, it doesn't allow it to come to its own compartment, and that's how it remains, safely stationed there inside the autophagosomes also.
Okay.
So this was the mechanism that we identified, and we are still trying to understand that in a same cell how this selective, recruitment or maturation can happen, and the way it functions is like all the cargoes gets recognized by autophagy machinery through ubiquitination, and there are different adapters which then recognize the cargo and then take it for degradation. So we're trying to understand which cargoes are involved in this selectivity, and that's something which is ongoing work.
Ongoing work. I mean, so once we have a better understanding of it, then we might have a new class of drugs which
class of
actually
drug, right.
restrict the autophagy from actually attacking the bacteria, right? I mean, it can.
No, you would promote only the selective autophagy against bacteria. That will help the
that
killing
will
of
help
bacteria.
actually kill the
Right.
bacteria.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
So that's interesting. See, another area of work that you have worked in the recent past is also looking at the connection between HIV and TB, right? So they often occur together.
Right. So that was something which emerged through the ongoing work on autophagy, where we realized that autophagy can kill bacteria. Of course, it has to do in a selective manner. And we also got to know that HIV can perturb autophagy in certain fashion. Now, the point that we were curious about, that if you know AIDS and talk to people who are in the research or clinic, they will say that when your CD4 T cell count comes down to 200, then you have manifestation of AIDS. The problem is for bacterial infection, which are major problem in AIDS because of their immunocompromised state. You don't require adaptive immune system to be to begin with.
Okay.
You require a strong innate immune response where macrophages disease can kill the bacteria. So how does these opportunistic infection take place in HIV infected individuals? That was the question, and we thought that probably autophagy could give you some answer, right? So if HIV is blocking autophagy, and if bacteria comes to those cells, then it has a very added advantage, right? Because now autophagy is not happening there, and it will survive. So we developed these assays where we could do co-infection in macrophages, and there we worked out the entire pathway of autophagy regulation during HIV-TB co-infection. And actually we have shown that if you can induce autophagy during HIV-TB co-infection, you can actually block the bacterial survival during co-infection. So that's an interesting mechanism which has emerged for opportunistic infection, where you target innate immunity and still and control the opportunistic bacterial survival.
Okay. So opportunistic bacteria means something like TB or
TB, and there are a lot of so Mycobacterium tuberculosis is the one which is pathogenic, right, which can cause infection to normal humans as well. But there are some different species or different strains which are not pathogenic.
Okay.
They don't cause disease to normal immune competent people, but they can cause disease in HIV, the AIDS patient, because they are immune compromised, right? So what we also showed that if you have HIV infection and then you infect with those non-pathogenic bacteria, their survival is also enhanced. So what it means that the bacteria HIV mediated perturbation of autophagy pathway is helping bacterial survival, and that's how it is allowing opportunistic infection. So one can take that to further develop it to see that how you can control it. But I mean, that was very interesting because it emerged from a hypothesis which was coming from our own lab. And then we, took it forward and showed that this also works during HIV-TB co-infection. So that's an interesting area where, again, this is also an ongoing work, but yeah, we have some very interesting.
Yeah, okay. So there are few ongoing work, like you are trying to work out the mechanism here and other cases. What are the new questions? Like, for example, when you are in postdoc, you had some very interesting, novel way of looking at the issue. Of course, the rest of the question were also kind of a continuation, but still they were new. You are looking at a new area. What is the new question that is kind of making you sleepless?
Right. So, I mean, you rightly said the central theme of the lab remains how host responds to infection and how you can, basically identify factors in the host which can be targeted to kill bacteria. So, one of the things that I started, initially got interested with was to again understand how host responds, and we decided to do, the whole genome microarray analysis to see the entire genome of the cell after infection, that how gene expression changes. Okay. Right? Now that led to identification of some very interesting pathways. One of those we are now developing into adjunct therapy against tuberculosis, and that's in guinea pig trial right now, and we hope to take it forward very soon. But another scientific challenging question emerged through that when we actually, after microarray is an old technique, so we actually did RNA sequencing from the same infected macrophages. And what we find, to go back to very basics, eukaryotic genes, the humans are eukaryotes. The eukaryotic genes are expressed in short stretches, which are known as exons, and they are disrupted by a non-coding region called introns. And there is a
so the message is not actually continuous. There is some message and some junk, and then
then there is a very complex process through which those discontinuous stretches are removed, and these coding regions are joined together
to get a final
to get a functional messenger, which will form a functional protein, right? So when we did the RNA sequencing, that allowed you to do this complete stitching of the sequences that were getting expressed, and we realized that a lot of these eukaryotic genes were actually not getting spliced properly.
Okay.
So their final matured versions were very different than what it would be in a normal condition from that what it was in infected condition. And if you look carefully, we found that a lot of those genes which would otherwise help cell to kill bacteria, they were the ones which were getting perturbed in their splicing, and the proteins that they would form will not be functional, or in many cases they will actually not form any protein. So these are very targeted assault on the host splicing machinery that the bacteria was doing. This was actually, I would say this was unprecedented finding, because there was no such report previously that so in a targeted fashion bacteria can regulate host splicing, which is, you can say, like the very housekeeping function in the cell. So that led to very excitement in the field, and subsequent to that, now we are trying to understand that how bacteria is actually able to do that. So we are now into mechanism, because you can imagine that if you identify how bacteria is able to do that, it opens up entirely new series of targets which can be developed for targeting bacteria. So this work we are doing right now with India Alliance DBT Wellcome Trust Senior Fellowship, and we hope to identify a specific mechanism which helps these splicing patterns to be regulated, and once you identify that, you can actually target those processes and see whether you can control bacterial survival inside the cell, again through targeting the host factors. That's the the continuous theme in the lab, that we target the host only.
That's a very, very interesting part, and we had a very, very wonderful and very interesting conversation with Dr. Dheeraj Kumar. Thank you for being with us in the show. And you can also see how looking at fundamental questions, fundamental science, indirectly helps, or rather paves the way for finding newer ways of treating dreadful diseases. So fundamental science and applied sciences are not two poles, but they are continuum. There are integrations, and we need to see this in our country. Thank you for being with us in the show.
Thank you.
Keep watching Eureka. We'll come back with another interesting conversation next week, same time.